William Gibson asks, what great terrors will we find in the unknown of vast space? I discuss this and more on today's episode. Welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today, I want to talk about a short story, because it is Short Story Tuesday. One that is about the vast unknown of space and a cottage industry that seems to arise out of something that is pretty bizarre in the wake of an astronaut's death. I am referring to Hinterlands by Wiliam Gibson, which was published in the science fiction journal, or science fiction magazine Omni in 1981. For those who don't know, Wiliam Gibson, and I have a feeling people who read a lot of science fiction might know who he is, but for those who don't, Wiliam Gibson was a Canadian-American science fiction writer. He frequently wrote about cyberpunk. He was one of the first to hop into that genre. He's most famous for writing the book Neuromancer, which is very foundational in science fiction, but also in the world of like cyberpunk. A lot of people credit him as sort of creating that, or not creating, but like sort of influencing that sort of genre. I actually haven't read that book. I would be very interested in doing that, and I probably should, not only just for this channel, but just getting that science fiction, which I don't read a lot of that on this channel, or just read a lot of it in general. He also wrote a number of other series and short stories. He pretty much predicted that the internet was going to change countries going forward. I think he said it might lead to the fall of the nation state. I don't necessarily think that's true, but he definitely talked about the internet before a lot of other people did, which is always significant, especially in the 80s and 70s, 80s, before the internet was really where it would get to in like the late 90s. Plenty of interesting stuff about Gibson. I haven't read him before, but I'm very eager to read more of him after reading Hinterlands, which I consider to be a high-quality short story. And without further ado, let's talk about Hinterlands. I will do a summary, a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. So Hinterlands focuses on a surrogate named Toby, who is working on a space station with his handler, Hero. Pretty strange what they describe as a Freudian relationship between the two. Don't really understand what a surrogate really does. I feel like Gibson could have done a lot better with explaining that, but essentially his job is to meet with astronauts who are returning from this weird experiment that's going on and prevent them from killing themselves and find out more information. And that's somewhat done through the use of drugs. As Toby is describing a new astronaut that's arriving, he's also going into the history of space travel, specifically how one astronaut named Olga managed to accidentally discover the highway or the river, basically a sort of extraterrestrial sort of technology that allows you to travel across vast distances. And this person did it by accident, and when she returned, she had killed herself. But they found a seashell that was extraterrestrial in origin in one of her hands, and they just thought it was interesting, so they studied her. And the study of Olga is leading to the sort of development of new industries and trying to find more explanations for how it happened. And Olga is also considered somewhat of a saint too. And this led to subsequent trips, which again resulted in deaths or bits of insanity among the astronauts who returned. And if it had just been seashells, as the narrator notes, as Toby notes, they would have eventually stopped sending people on these trips. But one time, a French traveler brought back a ring, very fancy extraterrestrial ring, that proved to be the Rosetta Stone, as they say, of cancer, essentially causing great leaps in our technology and scientific understanding. And so they decide to send more people through this sort of highway, which they don't really know how exactly it works. They're only interested in what they send forth and what they get back out of it. And this has done a lot of good for the people, for the science community and whatnot. But it's resulted in Toby and Hero having to work to calm down the astronauts so that they can get information out of them. And this leads to the new arrival that Toby was talking about at the beginning of the story, where he has to go meet the astronaut on the ship. Toby feels a great fear as he's getting close to the ship. That's related to the highway. Just a sense of existential, Lovecraftian type dread of what could possibly come out one of these times, and if it could possibly destroy humanity. When they get on the ship, they discovered that the astronaut has sort of reworked some of the instruments to help them kill themselves. But they also see readings on the wall that are going to produce molecular something. I don't really know, but it's going to it's going to result in another great leap forward in science, which is great. But it also comes at this fear of what's going to happen with this highway one of these times. And as the story comes to a close, Toby just notes that maybe Olga was right in killing herself. She was just maybe Olga was hoping that no one would ever find her ship and discover these terrible secrets that were within. And that's where the story ends there. In terms of analysis, there's a fair bit to talk about with Hinterlands. Very interesting sci-fi sort of horror kind of escapade here. One of the themes that Gibson is working with is that of the great unknown. And you see that with the title of the story. It's called Hinterlands, which is a German word that refers to a sort of backwoods, unexplored type of area that you typically saw with like in European history where this wasn't explored yet. These are the hinterlands. We haven't settled anything there. And this is what's going on in space as they discovered a hinterlands, this highway that they have no real understanding of, but they keep exploring, much to the fear of everyone involved. So Gibson presents a new means of connecting with alien civilizations. However, the mechanism of exploring it is unknown. There's no real way for them to know like how you actually go about like getting on this highway, because sometimes it rejects some of the people who go on there. I think Toby even said that they tried to get on the highway, but it just didn't work for them. Why does it work for some people but not for others? Why does some technology go through? Why doesn't it record? Nobody really knows. And it's very interesting because the scientists, the governments in charge are like, we don't really care how it works. We're only interested in what it's spitting out, what it's giving us. Because it's causing great leap forwards in science. And, that's a very interesting mindset to have, because it could possibly lead to your demise if you're misunderstanding how this technology works. It's just really unsettling and kind of creepy. Allow me to read you an interesting quote from this. At the edge of the highway, every human language unravels in your hands except perhaps the language of the shaman, of the Kabbalist, of the language of the mystic intent on mapping hierarchies of demons, angels, saints. And that's a really interesting quote, because it really gets at the sort of mystery involved there. That it's not science anymore. It's mysticism, because you're not really asking questions. You're getting something in, getting something out. Gibson also equates it to that of a cargo cult, specifically noting like people building landing pads to bring back the metal birds in some cultures. Just slightly, racist in thinking, but it does get at what's happening with humanity here, that we've discovered this new thing that we don't completely understand, and we're making use of it, even though, again, we don't understand the drawbacks of that. And it's also leading to an unspecified fear of the highway, especially with Toby. Every time he gets close to one of the ships to go inside and hopefully bring back an alive astronaut out to then calm them down and whatnot, he has to get close to the highway in order to do that. And it's filling him with such a big sense of dread, a fear of what that highway might do to him. And an even deeper sadness that it didn't do anything to him, that he wasn't able to travel on it. But there's that fear of the great unknown that's there, where you don't really know what intent the creatures that use the highway or who built it, what's going to happen to you. And I think ultimately this gets at the benefits and drawbacks of space travel, where Gibson is talking about, here's what we've done in space. We've managed to make it there, but what if we encounter something strange like this? Like, the benefits might be contact with advanced civilizations that can give us technology, but the drawbacks are, we might not understand how certain things work, and we might just use it without really considering what that means. And these non-scientist sort of people in power might just like what it's giving us, and they might not even consider what's going to happen. And so the rush of new technology leads to a lot of questions that might not always get answered. Of course, Gibson is also leaning on space horror here, the horrors of what you might find in the great unknown. You get science fiction blended with a little bit of Lovecraftian horror, again, because something far more sinister, something incredibly powerful that we have no chance of fighting might come through the highway, or might be in some way connected with the highway. And again, that horror is related to the great unknown, the fact that we don't really know what's coming from the highway or how it works, or we don't have an explanation for it. And even if something is simple and we still don't know how it works, it's going to create a bit of uncertainty within us, which is what's happening to Toby here. And it's a minor thing, but Gibson is also talking about international collaboration. You see it a little bit in this story, where Gibson is highlighting the need for peaceful collaboration among nations. Once they discover this highway, the countries reach out to each other and are like, how can we better understand this? What if we just used a couple translators and built like a space station where we could keep closer tabs on the highway in general. And so there's a need, in order to understand in order to succeed in space, we need collaboration from these different countries. It's not just going to be one country going into space and doing all of this. You need talent, and you need to focus your energy not on destroying each other, but on science and, of course, discovery. Of course, this is a bit funny because Gibson is using the language of the Cold War here, specifically calling it Russia like the Soviet Union, and referring to East and West Germany. And this is in 1981, so everything immediately becomes outdated like 9-10 years later, once the Berlin Wall falls and the Soviet Union kind of breaks apart. He was kind of it's kind of interesting how this story goes. Like, he's projecting into the future, but he's also missing a few things, which doesn't sink the story, but it is kind of interesting that he just assumes that the Cold War is going to go on for X amount more years. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Hinterlands by Wiliam Gibson. Not a particularly complex short story, but a very interesting one from a science fiction perspective. Putting forth a lot of ideas, especially about what we might find in space, and how, if we're rapidly advancing in a technological sense, we should really stop and ask questions before we do these weird and potentially hazardous things. I definitely recommend this. I'll put a link to it in the description. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Would love to hear from you and possibly have a discussion about Hinterlands. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about it, or the author if they don't already know. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and spacefaring travels. Farewell.